Imagine a tree so vast that its branches touch the sky, and its roots anchor realms of gods, giants, and even the dead. This is Yggdrasil, the axis of the Norse cosmos. We'll follow that tree into the choices the gods made, and the consequences they could not foresee. In this story, we'll trace how their first acts, shaping Midgard from a slain giant and gifting life to Ask and Embla, planted the seeds of later crises. The answer to why they acted is never just creation. It is the birth of a problem that would haunt gods and mortals alike. Spoiler, this solution creates its own enemies. And to see how, we must begin with the death that started it all. Join us tonight on a new journey through the mists of time and take the next step on the road to Ragnarok. What came before that moment was a universe without shape. The old stories call it Ginnungagap, a vast gap framed by the fires of Muspelheim and the ice of Niflheim. From that meeting of flame and frost rose Ymir, the first giant, swelling with raw, chaotic energy. Around him multiplied frost giants, each embodying a world without order. To change this, Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, chose to strike. They slew Ymir, and in that violent moment, the first form of a cosmos began. From his flesh, they made the earth. His blood spread into seas. His bones hardened into mountains, and his teeth and broken bones became stones. His skull was lifted up to form the sky, like a great helm turned into a dome. His brains scattered, and from them came the clouds. Even his hair found new life as trees that would root themselves across the land. And from within his slain body, the gods pulled maggots, setting them aside and transforming them into the dwarves, strange craftsmen destined to shape tools and wonders from beneath the ground. Finally, from Ymir's very eyelashes, they built the protective wall of Midgard, circling the human world in a barrier meant to hold back chaos. Imagine this scene for a moment, a world made not from stone quarried clean, but from flesh, blood, and bone. Order rose from one body's destruction, and that meant death clasped hands with creation at its very foundation. What this shows is a paradox built into the Norse cosmos. Harmony was possible, but its roots grew out of ruin. With the body of Ymir transformed, something even larger emerged from the ordered space. Yggdrasil, the great tree. Think of Yggdrasil as the living frame that binds everything together. Its roots push into the hidden worlds, including Niflheim, and its branches stretch wide into the heavens, connecting all 9 realms. The Norse imagination never wanders far from this image, because it turns the world into something whole, a fragile, immense system tied together by one vast trunk. It is beneath one of Yggdrasil's roots that Odin sought wisdom. At Mímir's well, the spring of deep knowledge, he paid with an eye so he could drink. The price he paid echoes the greater pattern we've seen. To create or protect the world, something must always be given up. Strength alone could not secure a universe born from violence. Odin understood that only vision, though costly, would allow him to guide the fragile balance. At his side, others carried roles just as essential. Thor stood as defender, a living wall holding off the giants who sought to collapse Midgard's defenses. Frigg, Odin's consort, worked less visibly, weaving fate itself, laying down strands of inevitability that gods and mortals alike would follow. Brief as these glimpses are, they show us that the new order depended not only on acts of force, but on guardianship, foresight, and threads no blade could cut. Picture the stage they prepared, the ground firm as flesh turned to soil, mountains jagged from bone, seas restless with blood, the sky overhead like a skull's hollow space stretched into a roof. It is not comfort they built, it is continuity, a vast stage waiting for its players. The paradox remains inscribed in every mountain and ocean. To make order, the gods committed destruction, and that scar could never truly heal. Creation itself carried risk, and that risk only deepened when the gods chose to open this shaped stage to others. Because having built the realms, they did not keep them empty. Soon they would turn to the question that lingers still. Why, after binding chaos and paying such costs, did they decide to make a place for humankind? Along the shore of the New World, it was not land or sky that drew the gods' attention, but two fallen trunks, one ash, one elm. From shapes of wood, Odin and his brothers chose to form something entirely new, Ask and Embla, the first man and woman. Odin leaned close and breathed life into them, filling what had been lifeless timber with spirit and pulse. Vili gave them intelligence and will, the capacity for thoughts, choices, and desires. They granted senses and the gift of speech, so that light and sound could be known and meaning shared between two voices. Pause and imagine that scene for a moment. Tree bodies lifted by divine touch, no longer rooted in soil, but walking, speaking, thinking. Seedlings placed inside a stone fence. That is what these first humans were. Fragile, small, yet given the spark of growth. Their world was Midgard, not the shining halls of Asgard or the raw wilderness of Jötunheim, but something between. Its walls were not mountains nor rivers, but a fence built from Ymir's eyelashes. The shape of their protection still carried the mark of destruction. Inside that ring, humanity's first steps began, always under the shadow of what lay beyond. What this means is that humanity entered a stage already filled with older powers. The dwarves stirred beneath the ground, forging treasures for gods, but also their undoing. Giants, bloodkin of Ymir, lingered outside Midgard's bounds, waiting and watching. The Vanir lived both as kin and rivals, storing up tensions that would soon break into war. In the center sat fragile humankind, protected yet vulnerable, destined to feel the tremors of every quarrel. That is why the guardianship of certain gods mattered so deeply. Frigg carried the loom of fate, extending her weaving not just through halls of Asgard, but through the lives of men and women. Each mortal step felt the tug of her thread. Thor bore the hammer that always circled back to Midgard, his blows holding off giant incursions. Without his shield, the human fence of eyelashes would collapse in an instant. Divine attention did not make mortals secure. It emphasized how easily their world could be broken. In giving Ask and Embla life, the gods gave humanity both a gift and a burden. It was not merely breath and awareness, but a place inside the great contest of forces. Where once a battle between Aesir and giants was only divine risk, now human lives hung in the balance. If wisdom failed, if defense faltered, mortals were the first to pay the cost. The paradox appears again. To create meant to stake more lives upon the board. Ask and Embla were not just the beginning of a human line, but also the bond that tied the fate of people to the wars of the gods. What began as driftwood turned to breathing forms became the seed for future trials. By setting humans in Midgard's center, the gods ensured that their conflicts would no longer ripple distantly. They would fall into human lives as loss, hunger, survival, or ruin. Creation and conflict walked forward together from the start. And here the stories remind us, in the old order, no act of shaping came without its cost. The same choices that raised Midgard also foreshadowed later struggles. The clash of Aesir and Vanir, and even the loss of Baldur, each showing how divine decisions carried costs that reached beyond their first moment. What this means is simple. Creation and consequence are threads in the same fabric. Think of life as weaving. Each new strand forms a pattern, but also tightens the pull that may one day snap. Which early choice by the gods would you change, and why? Try weaving this motif into your next story and tell me what you discover. And if you enjoyed this exploration, like and subscribe for more mythic frameworks told this way. Thank you for joining this journey into the ancient world. If you enjoyed this story, consider exploring our next deep dive, where gods, heroes, and forgotten myths await.